Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're hanging out with Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov, who is an expert in covert action, and we got some covert actions to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon, and we are talking with Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov, and he is the, I guess, editor over at covertactionmagazine.com.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
He's
Yes.
the editor, and he writes all kind of articles, and he's got books and all that. And man, if you want to know stuff all about all things spookery, all kinds of covert action, CIA and MI6, and all the devious and evil deeds that's been done by the governments over the course of the years, Jeremy Kuzmarov is your guy, and he's generally here every 10:30 Eastern time. We've been between me moving, traveling, we've had holidays and all kind of things. We've missed a lot of Fridays, but we are back on track now. We are back on track, and we got a lot of important things to talk about. All right, let's get going. And by the way, let me just show you where we're working from so you'll know this is one of the best resources on the net. covertactionmagazine.com. I'm going to hit the look at that. How Human Rights Watch shattered Yugoslavia, CIA spy master, all kind of things. 9/11 victims' families are suing Saudi Arabia. Why not the CIA too, right? Okay, there we go. All kinds of Tulsi Gabbard, CIA, MI6 lawfare. I mean, if you want to know stuff about, as I said, all kind of spooky stuff, he is your guy. Let's start with this. So in Ukraine, and this is a great article by Dr. Kuzmarov, CIA trained spy master, that's old Budnov, implicated in war crimes, appointed presidential chief of staff in Ukraine. Isn't that interesting? The chief of staff. So Kirill Budnov has ties to far-right pro-Banderite groups. Let's start with this guy. He's a spy, he's a CIA trained op, and apparently he has ties to far-right pro-Banderite groups. Hey, that'll get you to the top in Ukraine. What do we need to know, Dr. Kuzmarov?
Well, yeah, this is a window into the ugliness of that government that they bill as this great democracy that we've funneled billions of weapon and taxpayer dollars. When you have these really fascist elements running the government who've been involved in horrendous atrocities that ultimately drew the Russians into the conflict. The narrative is totally misleading of unfeathered Russian aggression. And just look at the career of this guy. He started, he was supporting the Maidan coup. He was involved with the Ukrainian special forces and intelligence services. And after the Maidan coup, he fought in in eastern Ukraine, where they had voted for their autonomy, and they were trying to push these language laws and destroy their culture. And it led to a civil conflict. And his units, according to Andrei, I interviewed for this article a guy named Andrei Telezenko, who was a former parliamentary aide in Ukraine, an insider, who ultimately left the country because he said it compromised its sovereignty. And he knows all these guys very well. He said Budnov and his units went into home in the Donbass in this dirty war when the Obama administration was providing all the weapons and had backed the coup. This is in 2014, 2014 through 2017. He and his units would go into, they targeted wealthier people in the Donbass. They went into their homes and killed people, killed whole families, including children, women and children, and then stole their artwork and their jewelry and all their valuables and sold it on the black market. And this was not reported anywhere. And I learned of this was talking with Telezenko. So Budnov was up to that. Then he got wounded in the fighting in the Donbass, and they brought him unusually to Walter Reed for treatment. and that showed that he was being groomed by the CIA or U.S. government agencies, because they don't just bring Ukrainian fighters for medical treatment in Walter Reed unless there's somebody important, excuse me, and trying to groom them. And then he rose and he became head of the Ukrainian intelligence service. And even the New York Times reported how he was known for his audacious covert operations, including sneaking into Crimea and mounting terrorist action in Crimea. And he was implicated in the bombing of the bridge connecting Crimea to the mainland, and that killed 5 civilians. And he was implicated in these Phoenix type. The CIA has been running a Phoenix type operation in Ukraine since the Maidan coup of 2014, where they've been running assassination squads and carrying out car bombing and terrorist activity. And this has actually been reported in the New York Times and in The Economist. And they've targeted, journalists and bloggers and mayors. It's like the Phoenix, because Phoenix was known in Vietnam for targeting civilian officials, because the Viet Cong had actually taken over a lot of areas in the country, and there are a lot of regions where like the mayors and city councils were supportive of the Viet Cong. So under the insurgency, against the U.S. Puppet regime and U.S. invasion, and why wouldn't they be? I mean, they're trying to reclaim their country, just like in eastern Ukraine, they're trying to reclaim their country from the Ukrainian thugs and fascists armed by the U.S. And so they're targeting civilian officials, mayors, city council, governors for assassination. And that's what these Ukrainian commandos working with CIA and other U.S. intelligence agency and special forces are doing. And Budanov was involved in these Phoenix type assassination terrorist operation. And this is basically, it was reported in the New York Times that he's known for audacious covert activity. And now he's been appointed chief of staff. And Tarazenko, the source for my article, main source, said that the reason probably they put him in there was to try and protect Zelensky, because the British MI6 may be trying to mount a coup against him and putting in Zaluzny, because he's kind of lost he's seen as a political liability now. Telezenko agreed. I asked him about Scott Ritter's movie Agent Zelensky, and he said he basically agreed with it. He had a few minor points. Maybe he felt a little differently or knew some stuff maybe Ritter didn't report as an insider, but he's told me he agreed with Ritter's premise, and that Zelensky likely was a British agent, that he visited with the head of MI6 when he went to Britain instead of meeting with the British Prime Minister, which is usual diplomatic protocol. But he said that the British seem to have turned against Zelensky now. He's seen as liability, and they want somebody else to better stabilize the situation. So that's why they may have appointed, and the U.S. may still be backing Zelensky and some of the people in Ukraine. So that's what Telezenko says to why they put in Budanov to try and protect him, because he's like a strong man. But there is the danger, he said, that he could mount a coup and that he could take over. And he's really a very dangerous guy. He said he's fascist leaning, and anyone who disagrees with him, he sees it valid as having them killed. And he's a dictator in waiting. So these are the kind of people we have in power in Ukraine. As we discussed on the show, that war has been a disaster for Ukrainians. It's leading to the potential of World War III. It's been disastrous for Americans. It's sucked more of our valuable taxpayer dollars, just like bankrupt wars like Afghanistan.
It looks like you've got here that one of the victims of his death squad was the former head of the Socialist Party in Ukraine's parliament, Ilya Kiava, who Ukraine military intelligence took credit for it. So they killed, all this talk about, yes, we must protect the, quote, democracy. this great democracy of Ukraine, because Putin hates democracy. Well, that's the only reason he's attacking them, because he looked over and he says, wow, that's a great democracy. Can't have democracy on my board. But literally, one of the heads of a party in parliament, they killed, and this guy took credit for killing him.
Yeah, they openly brag about it. They're proud of it, and they set up a website, Mirotvorets, that says it's based in Langley, Virginia, and they celebrate the killing of Russians and killing often of civilians, including members of parliament. So yeah, some great democracy. I mean, they banned 12 parties, and they have a torture gulag, and they keep delaying the election. It's never going to take place. So I mean, it's truly out of George Orwell, and a lot of liberals have all along continued to buy into this idea we have to fight to save democracy in Ukraine. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, the Putin, I've looked into a lot of the assassination they attribute to Putin are actually false flag operations. Like I have an article coming up the next maybe month on the Litvinenko assassination. That's one of the first one they attributed to Putin. And a French intelligence operative came out with all the details about how Boris Berezovsky and MI6 were involved, and that was a false flag operation to set up Putin and make him look bad. And we see that with a lot of these other assassinations that Putin is blamed for. So there's actually scant evidence that Putin has actually kills people in the way they say, but yet the Ukrainians are openly bragging. This is not controversial. They take credit and they brag about it on the website, how they're killing these people, including members of parliament. And we're supposed to believe that this is a democracy that we have to stand up for and give billions of dollars in our taxpayers when our schools are falling apart and they can't pay the teachers enough to make a living wage. I mean, it's unbelievable. But all the liberals have gone along. The entire liberal caucus, Bernie Sanders and AOC, they've all been gung-ho supporters of this criminal enterprise with Phoenix. Phoenix aroused huge anti-war protests. Where are the protests in opposition now over the Ukrainian version of Operation Phoenix, which is as deadly as the Vietnam version?
And we see here they're using car bombs. You can see a picture of here. They used car bombs. They used, on one instance, there was a Russian blogger / journalist. I think he might have been in St. Petersburg or somewhere, where they used like a trophy or something, and they put a bomb in it and blew it up. So they used terrorist tactics and terrorist techniques, as you said, just like the Phoenix program.
Yeah, and we're supposed to believe ferret all our taxpayer dollars to fighting a war on terror when we're involved in major openly involved in major terrorist activity, including bombing a bridge. Imagine if somebody tried to bomb the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco or in New York and cause the collapse of the bridge and cause drivers to fall to their death in the water below and to impede the commerce. We would go crazy at the terrorist barbarians. And yet these terrorist animals who are doing this are being celebrated as freedom fighters, when many actually openly wear Nazi insignia. Or like, this guy Budanov is tied with these Banderite groups who worship a Nazi collaborator who killed a lot of Jews during World War II. And we're championing them as great freedom fighters. And a lot of our universities professors are promoting this rhetoric. The National Endowment for Democracy is very, very strong in trying to promote this propaganda. But it's all over our media, all of our political class. But if you just scratch a little bit beneath the surface, you see something really horrific.
One of the things that Andre said was, motivated largely by the opportunity to make money and gain power, Budanov basically told the CIA he would do anything they told him to, because he knew that people allied with the CIA are the ones who advance in the military's ranks. Others were asked to do the same thing, but said no, because they knew it could lead to a world war and destroy Ukraine, but not him. And that's kind of what the CIA looks for, somebody who's greedy, who's selfish, and murderous and sociopathic, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's, yeah, there's a long record of that. The most unscrupulous people ultimately get promoted and elevated with the help of the CIA, and it turned these countries into nightmarish places. And there's so many examples. Yeah, if you study the history of the Indochina War, the people allied with the CIA, who rose in the ranks, were people like Nguyen Ngoc Loan, who was featured on television shooting a prisoner in the head. And an American general, William Corson, said he makes Gestapo method look like the Quakers. And and this is a 4 or 5-star American general writing this. And he said that he didn't like the way people voted on a certain bill in the parliament, so he went in, got his thugs to remove them from the parliament and shot 4 MPs in the head. So that's, if you study the Vietnam War, you can see that it's these kind of people that the CIA is empowering, totally unscrupulous, and it ruins country after country. So people have to wake up to this.
And basically, he also says this guy considers anybody who's opposed to war with Russia or who has a different political ideology to be a traitor who should be killed, which we see that. We saw what happened. What was his name? There was a guy that I got interviewed by a while back who was, I think, originally from Chile, who they killed.
Gonzalo Lira, yeah.
Gonzalo
He was
Lira.
a foreign journalist, and he was killed, yeah, because he was promoting a more peace agenda. Anyone who promotes a peace agenda is considered a Russian asset and a traitor.
Yeah, and so ultimately what you have is you have a guy who kills an American. We later found out that people went to the CIA, went to the US government, the State Department, and said, hey, they've captured Gonzalo Lira. Would you look into it? And the State Department did nothing, which to me implies that the CIA was behind it, that the CIA was most likely behind the capture and the murder of Gonzalo Lira.
Well, and Telezenko really emphasizes that the CIA has a much wider influence than most people are aware. And I mean, I mentioned to him when I was talking to him that the New York Times had come out with an article that the CIA had 12 bases that they set up in Ukraine after the Maidan coup, and he said, well, the number is most likely 20 bases, and that they're everywhere. There's a quote in the article how they're everywhere. They go undercover as journalists, as political officer, the businessman, and that they're basically running these intelligence networks that are involved in this terrorist activity. But they're good at what's the word, plausible deniability. When things go sour, they blame the Ukrainian and they divorce themselves from these operations. But really, they're giving support to it, and in many different ways, including at the providing the equipment, providing probably a lot of the intelligence that's used for the blacklists, helping set up the website Maratvarets, which, I mean, they're pretty open about it because it says Langley, Virginia, that website.
Right.
And that's the website where it's basically a public blacklist. And when somebody's assassinated, they mark him off with an X and celebrate his death. So it's really perverse.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane what we're looking at here. One of the other things, let's see, we've got another interesting article that we want to look at, and that is, let me find it.
Was it with the sun? I think you missed it. There's some suns there. The Venezuela cartel of the suns.
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah, you see some suns on the left next to Tulsi.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, CIA facilitated drug trafficking through cartel. Trump administration falsely accuses Nicolas Maduro of controlling. Yes, the cartel of the sun, and ultimately, as Max Blumenthal says, the only cartel down there is the cartel of the Gringos, Cartel de la Gringo. The CIA is running. Anyway, what do we need to know about the cartel of the sun, de la Sol? That apparently evidence is now coming out that this was just a CIA operation, and now they're just like, okay, never mind, it didn't exist. They dropped it out. They charged it. They edited the charges, and then it disappeared.
Yeah, well, first, it's not a real cartel. You know, they make it like he controlled this huge drug cartel. It's not actually a drug cartel. It was a rogue coalition of military officers involved in drug trafficking who wore a certain patch on their uniform, sun. But it's not a drug cartel. And then what surfaced was a 60 Minutes investigation. And yeah, periodically the mainstream media will do some good investigations like this one by 60 Minutes from the mid 90s that expose a CIA drug trafficking network in collaboration with the Cartel of the Suns in around 1990, 1991. And it involved a guy named Jose Guillen, who is this extreme right wing officer who I think had been involved in some dirty war operations in El Salvador, and some of the CIA people working with him had also been involved. You know, in the 80s when there were these violent counterinsurgency operation in El Salvador, and he was involved in drug smuggling, and he actually got arrested at the Miami airport for smuggling the exact amount is in the article, quite a lot of cocaine into the United States, and then he was mysteriously the indictment against him never went forward, and he was released, and he never was faced any trial or never went to prison because he was being protected by the CIA, and the DEA was irate. And this is a pattern, that goes back to the Indochina wars. If people who are interested in this topic, I would recommend Alfred W. McCoy's classic book, The Politics of Heroin: CIA Complicity in the Global Drug Trade. And that book was originally written in the early 70s when McCoy, as a young man, he traveled to Southeast Asia to investigate the drug trade. And he also interviewed a number of disaffected DEA agents who worked in Southeast Asia and who were extremely upset because their investigations were being blocked by the CIA, whose major assets, like Vang Pao, who had been used to run the secret war in Laos, was a major figure in the Golden Triangle drug trade. And that follows the norm here, is that the CIA is protecting one of its top assets, who's in this case is smuggling a huge amount of cocaine into the United States. And the revenue from the drug money may have been used to fund, kind of like in Ukraine, state terror operation, because that was the era where you had the Caracazo in Venezuela, was an uprising against neoliberal austerity measures that was violently suppressed by state security forces. And that was a time when Hugo Chavez was emerging as a major figure within the military, revitalizing Venezuela's left, which, as I discussed, drawing on my book, Modernizing Repression, the CIA, working under the cover of USAID, had provided a lot of support to the police in Venezuela in the 60s to suppress left-wing movements in the 60s that had been pushing for the nationalization of Venezuela's oil and more social justice-oriented policies. They were violently suppressed with the help of the CIA in the 60s and 70s, but those movements revitalized under Hugo Chavez's leadership in the 90s. So the CIA springs back into action under Bush 1 and Bill Clinton against Chavez, although they failed. But that may have been a key purpose for why they were ramping up drug smuggling, because they need to raise revenue for more surveillance and more, targeting these left-wing groups that ultimately prevailed when Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution took power in 1998.
To add this, whenever I talk about people are outraged right now, oh, they kidnap Maduro, I remind people that they kidnapped Chavez, but I also remind people that the U.S. kidnapped Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who was the duly elected government of Haiti. And might I add, what Americans don't know about Haiti, they see this extreme poverty. What they don't know is you go up on the hill and there's mansions with billionaires. And was it Moise, one of the people that was the president, but one of these puppets that they put in power, I think it might have been Moise, had these gigantic banana plantations that he made millions off, but was also involved in cocaine running. So that Haiti is another hub that the CIA and other intelligence agencies use Haiti as a hub that they run cocaine out of additionally.
Absolutely, yeah. And then they demonize Cuba, but Cuba and its revolution reclaimed the country's sovereignty so that it wouldn't be a Haiti, banana republic subjected to outside manipulation and the obscene levels of corruption that you're describing. And yeah, there is a long pattern of that. Like if you look at Central America in the 80s, the CIA was all over the drug trade there to finance the dirty war operations against the Contras, against the leftist forces in El Salvador and Guatemala. And you had, Barry Seal running drugs for the CIA with Bill Clinton giving the green light, and his Clinton's friends who owned the banks in Arkansas that Hillary Clinton represented were laundering all that drug money. So the CIA is often directly involved, and it's funding its dirty war through drugs, and it's collaborating with these corrupt elites. And this is, a phenomenon throughout Central South America. So, the drug war is a complete farce. I mean, the way Trump, he's claiming he's going to stop drugs by arresting Maduro is ridiculous. When the evidence is so thin, and this indictment, Max Blumenthal had a good article in the Gray Zone, just kind of debunking the indictment, and it seems to rely on this intelligence officer named Carvajal, who was, I think, he was arrested, and so he's trying to get a light sentence, and he accused Venezuela of interfering in the 2020 election to elect Joe Biden. And I mean, there's absolutely no, so his credibility as a witness, he makes these allegations that there's absolutely no evidence for. And then, there's the long pattern of CIA drug trafficking. And, another case is Colombia. Recently, their former president, Uribe.
And by the way, I do, you probably know what's happening with Verizon. So I do have, having, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm having a little bit of issues with my internet. So if I'm gone, just can keep talking if you can't see me, if I disappear or something. Okay. Oh, okay, you're back. If I disappear, usually it's for 30 seconds or so, and then I'm back. So you were froze up for me, but everybody could probably still see. Verizon's having trouble. Something suspicious, because Verizon went out for like 24 hours and it still has problems. Twitter's down today. Yeah, there's something suspicious going on with all of this, Verizon's whole system going down, and they're like, it was a software problem. And today Twitter's going down and they're like, oh, nothing to see here. But at any rate, well, I think it's not, all people have to do is look at this. During the 80s, the United States was in Central America, never more than that. I mean, just drug wars, dirty wars, death squads, everything. They were from one end of Central America and South America to the other. The CIA crawling with CIA agents. And those were the years where there was never more cocaine flowing into the United States than ever before. When the CIA was there is when the most cocaine flew into the United States. By the way, when the U.S. went in Afghanistan and the CIA was in there, there was never more heroin running out of Afghanistan than when the CIA and the U.S. is there. So it seems to be a pattern. How about this? When the U.S. was in Vietnam, all of this heroin started flowing out of the Golden Triangle. Whenever the U.S. military and the CIA go into a region, whatever drugs are there flow out like mad. It's obvious that, go back to the opium wars, whether it's the British Empire or the U.S., these are the biggest drug dealers in history.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I studied the drug war. In fact, my PhD thesis was on the drug war in the Vietnam and the war on drugs. And that is the reality. I mean, in Thailand, that was the U.S. backed a coup in the late 40s in Thailand that ultimately installed a very, very corrupt government there. And, I was doing a lot of research at the National Archives, and it was often the old documents, like from the 50s, they're very direct about what you're saying, that there are huge amount of drugs flowing out of Thailand, and the people that the U.S. is in collaboration with are extremely corrupt. So, if you review, and it's similar with the Indochina stuff with Laos, it's there in the documents. they're openly discussing it. And yeah, I agree. Is that these empire they use drugs? I mean, drugs is a major source of revenue. So to finance, it costs a lot of money to run an empire, to run military operation. You got to pay the soldiers. You need weapons. You need food for the soldiers. You need to pay off people. The CIA, the only way they get their way in countries is because they have a lot of money to pay off, to bribe these unscrupulous people. Yeah, and they target people who they know lack morals or can easily be bought off. So they need an endless source of money. And after World War II, they stole Edward Lansdale tortured a Japanese general, so they got access to the Yamashita's gold, which was some gold that the Japanese had looted and stored in different locations. So that's been a major source of revenue ever since. But the drug trade is a huge source of revenue. So yeah, everywhere the CIA go, the drug trade booms, and they often provide the infrastructure to make the drug trade more successful. And often USAID development aid is often very politicized, and it often has the effect of enhancing the drug traffic because they build up the infrastructure in areas where their U.S. allies are running the drug trade, and so they get better transportation networks. And the CIA will supply, like they set up the Civil Air America, Civil Air Transport became known as Air Opium because that flew a lot of the opium in and out and made it much more profitable. And they also set up the banking structure, like in the Indochina era, and this is well documented in books. They set up the Nugent Hand Bank. Theodore Shackley and William Colby was the legal counsel. There was other CIA people, Michael Hand and Frank Nugent, one of whom died under very suspicious circumstances. The other escaped. The Nugent Hand was ultimately exposed, and people were going to go to prison. And then I think it was Hand. He came back to the United States, and a journalist who wrote a book. I did an article the last year on the Nugent Hand Bank, and there's a good book that was published a few years ago. And this journalist tracked Michael Hand to somewhere, I believe, in West Virginia. He's like still working in the military related industry, and he had the same passport, same social security number. He could have easily been arrested. He was involved in myriad criminal activity that led to his partner committing suicide, and the bank had to shut down. But he just came back to the United States and continued to work in the arms business for all these years. But that bank was a money laundering bank, and then its successor was the Bank of Commerce, BCCI. So these are money laundering banks that the CIA sets up. So it creates the infrastructure to enable the flourishing of the drug trade, and it's better documented in that era. Now the same thing is obviously still going on. It's harder to get all the details until there's some kind of big corruption case or expose. But we have a lot. There are books available on the Nugent Hand Bank, the BCCI, so people can understand how those networks operate. They're a criminal network.
Yeah, clearly, what we're looking at is the U.S. government taking the mantle from the British government, saying, for all of our black ops, there's the budget that we see, right? There's the intelligence budget, and there's the defense so-called war budget that we see coming from Congress. But there's a whole nother budget, But remember when it came out that they were there was drug trafficking, there was illegal weapon selling and buying. They were selling weapons to the Iranians supposedly to get money to sponsor other things. And that was treated as though it was a one-time, oh wow, what about the Iran-Contra affair? That was not a one-time thing. That was how they do business. Criminal activity generates funds for black operations, and they set up banks to launder the money.
Absolutely. And that was the same network. Well, it was a network that the journalist Danny Casolaro, who was doing a great job exposing it, about to write a major expose, and actually been in Australia where he was interviewing members of an Australian parliamentary commission that had been investigating the CIA and organized crime and the Nugent Hand Bank. And then he was murdered in the West Virginia hotel room. But he was showing the continuity between the Yamashita gold. It started with the theft of that criminal network that was involved in the theft of the Yamashita gold, and then they stole this software from Bill Hamilton. Bill Hamilton developed this computer software that he was marketing to law enforcement agencies to better coordinate amongst themselves. It was very sophisticated computer software. You know, he was a computer genius who had worked for the NSA. The CIA bankrupted him, stole his software so they can better facilitate money and drug laundering operations. And yeah, it was the same network that had operated in the Indochina War. And some key figures were Theodore Shackley, who was the CIA station chief in Laos during the Indochina War, and also it was a head of the Operation Phoenix. And he was a top, when George Bush was appointed CIA director in 1975, he appointed Theodore Shackley as his top deputy. So Bush was the head of the octopus, and actually Casolaro, I think, had the good to expose Bush himself and his crime family, and that's why he was murdered. But yeah, these networks, and they're still around. You know, I had another article, I don't know if we discussed it on this show, that the arrest of Robert Sensi in the past 2 months, one of the Iran-Contra operatives named Robert Sensi was arrested, a CIA agent. He was arrested for selling bribery and selling weapons to a Mexican drug cartel. And his criminal career goes back to the Iran-Contra era and this octopus network. And he was involved in the October surprise, where they deliberately they bribed the Iranians to delay release of American hostages after the Iranian Revolution, so that it would make Jimmy Carter look bad, and so Ronald Reagan would be elected, because Reagan was the champion, you know, of the more hawkish elements in the CIA. So Robert Sensi was involved in the October surprise, Iran-Contra, and he's just been arrested in 2025 for arms deals with the Mexican drug cartel. So that indicate that this octopus is still working, and then there's a huge line of continuity from the Iran-Contra era to continued drug trafficking, and that's, again, as you point out, that's how they raise revenues. As high as the budget that Congress allocates for the CIA and other agencies, they still always need more and more money, and they need pure cash, you know, like criminals, so they can pay off their informants, pay off people like this Budanov, to relate it to him. He's an asset who's doing the CIA and U.S. government bidding in Ukraine, and they've surely paid him off from his time in Walter Reed. I mean, they paid for his first-rate medical care after he was injured. That in itself is a bribe.
Well, now, you know, let me show you something real quick. And this is something that I found a while back, and then Google disappeared it. And you have to do Brave searches and other things to find it, right? Look at this. Okay, remember the big El Chapo thing?
Mm-hmm.
Confirmed, the DEA struck a deal with Mexico's most notorious drug cartel. An investigation by El Universal found that between the years of 2000 and 2012, that's 12 years, long before El Chapo was arrested, right? The U.S. government had an arrangement with Mexico's Sinaloa drug cartel that allowed, listen to this, the organization to smuggle billions of dollars of drugs, while Sinaloa provided information on rival cartels. Sinaloa, led by El Chapo, supplies 80% of the drugs entering the Chicago area. There have long been allegations that Guzman, considered to be the world's most powerful drug, coordinates with American authorities. But the El Universal investigation is the first to publish court documents that include collaborating testimony from a DEI agent and a Justice Department official. The written statements were made to the U.S. District Court in Chicago in relation to the rest of, there you go. So now, again, what do we have? The same thing. All of this El Chapo crap. And what happens? It comes back that the U.S., as always, was working with El Chapo. You know what the El Chapo thing sounds like to me? It sounds like, what's his name? Noriega, where Noriega was their guy until he didn't want to do something that they liked. and at that time he had to go. And El Chapo was their guy until such time. And we've got DEA agents and other people admitting that they worked with what is it, DEA and DOJ admitting, yeah, we worked with him, we had a deal with him, yeah, he could bring drugs into the U.S., we kept our mouths shut. They keep their mouths shut, they got a piece of the money, and probably, most likely, assisted with bringing the drugs in.
Yeah, and at the end of my article, Peter Dale Scott, for those not familiar, I would recommend listeners consult his writings. For years, he studied the drug trade and the CIA, and he concluded that the purpose of the war on drugs was not to actually stop the drug trade, but was simply to alter market share in favor of U.S. allies. And so that would be just yet one more example. And then, yeah, they'll cut them loose, and that's, you see that with the CIA. That's why Zelensky, his days may be numbered. Once he's lost his utility, they don't care about these people. I mean, they use them for their own agenda, just like the Diem regime in South Vietnam. They used it for their own agenda, and then they backed a coup against Diem, and he was murdered. And that's, comes back to the quote of Henry Kissinger. It's bad to be an enemy of the U.S., but often worse to be a friend or ally, because they show no loyalty, and they'll brutally cut them off. And often these people meet a dismal fate in life. So you have to. My advice to any leaders around the world is to think twice, because you may think it brings a short-term benefit alliance with the U.S., but they'll cut you off, and you may end up dead in a hole somewhere, or in prison for life, like Noriega spent out his days in prison. He thought he was riding on the high horse, and he had U.S. support when he was doing his drug trafficking, and then he started allowing more, started acting like a head of state, doing what was in the interest of Panama, saying we're going to reclaim control over our canal. And then they cut his head off, and he's in prison for life. And unlike Juan Orlando Hernandez, he didn't get any kind of sweet pardon. So because
I think it's obvious now with Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was caught shipping 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. I think it's pretty clear he was a CIA drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty clear. Let me ask you this, but we got 10 minutes left. There's a lot going on with this Erica Kirk thing. And, I just did a video on it that I would advise people to look at, talking, of an investigator in issues about the crime scene. But, what have you, in looking at this, have you seen anything lately that, shall we say, piques your interest or causes you to take great pause when reading the mainstream story about what the heck happened with the Charlie Kirk assassination?
Well, yeah, it seemed like to follow the pattern, because I'm doing this book on political assassinations in American history, and pointing to consistent cover-ups, and debunking the myth of the deranged lone gunman, and the myths of American exceptionalism, that America has this model democracy and we don't have political assassinations here, and it's just a work of these lone deranged people, and law enforcement gets the right man. But we see actually, constant cover-ups, political intrigues, like in other, foreign countries. And I think it delegitimates the American empire is predicated on American exceptionalism, that we have a model democracy. So I think that's why the intellectual classes and gatekeepers don't go into this terrain, and stick to this, and try and attack anybody who probes into these cases, whether the Kirk or more historical cases, calls them conspiracy theorists, doesn't engage with the evidence they present, just uses name calling and smears or blacklisting, and they don't get the book reviewed in any New York Times or any major mainstream publications. From all now, you're more of an expert on the Kirk case than me. I haven't looked into it in that depth, but from what I've read, it seems to follow the norm. There's so many questions, it just doesn't add up, the story they're telling, and there's so many oddities. And then there's the crime scene, as we were discussing. They're covering up the crime. One feature of all these assassinations is that they usually destroy the evidence right away, destroy the crime scene, So there can't be a proper investigation. And then the Erica Kirk is suspicious. Yeah, she seems to have connection to the CIA. We were talking before that there's a video where she's talking about she's promoting when she was a young woman more funding for the CIA in Congress. And the whole Turning Point USA is kind of suspicious because the CIA has in the past actually been behind a lot of these conservative youth organizations. The case I'm familiar with is the Young Americans for Freedom, because in the 60s, and this is actually documented um, empirically, that in the 60s you had youth were turning to more radical leftist group, particularly the Students for Democratic Society was a leading campus anti-war organization in the 60s, and it had huge number of supporters on campuses across the country, including in conservative southern states. SDS had a big presence. So the CIA used William F. Buckley, who was a CIA station chief in Mexico and a CIA intellectual, among others, to set up the Young Americans for Freedom as a conservative counterweight to SDS to try and undercut support for the SDS and draw them into the fold of the conservative, capitalist pro-U.S. empire. And so that, Turning Point USA, I think, is a spinoff of Young American for Freedom, and it has not only big financial backing from wealthy people, but also, I believe, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know for a fact. I haven't looked into their financing, but it's not officially documented like with Young American for Freedom. But it would not surprise me if you find CIA support for Turning Point USA. But then Kirk, yeah, I mean, he's kind of like these third world assets. They use him for a purpose. He's this young, good-looking guy, beautiful wife. He's good to convey the message among the youth. But then he stops following the company line. He starts criticizing U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and Israel, and that's when he becomes a liability, and that's when his good times end. And so, I mean, there's plausibility to that theory, and I'm sure more evidence will come out over time. Already, we know that there's a major cover-up, that this guy who they're fingering for the killing, it doesn't make sense. He's not a. The other thing is they're often not good sniper. Like somehow he shot this guy, but yeah, he's not trained in weaponry. And it reminds me of Lee Harvey Oswald. They joke, the people in his unit joked about how poor a shot he was in the army. He was like the worst, and yet he supposedly pulled off the spectacular feat that only the world's top sniper can pull off. And actually, people had identified Oswald in the lunchroom, that he wasn't even on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. And the same for James O'Reilly, the person who sold him the gun, said he knew nothing about guns, and he didn't even ask any questions when he was purchasing the gun, because somebody told him what gun to purchase. And Ray was clear, and they also claim that the shot that Ray would have had to have pulled off, he would have somehow had to have been hanging out a bathroom window and fired the world like greatest shot ever to strike King through some bushes, which and tree line that they actually cut the next day to make that theory more plausible. But we know witnesses, the real shooter, there was the grassy knoll version, the King shooting. So anyway, once the real shooters came from that grassy knoll, much closer to King, and Ray was set up. Somebody even a witness at the store, because he allegedly dropped a bundle on the store. They said that bundle was dropped 5 minutes before King was assassinated, and that was supposedly proof that Ray ran in a hurry and dropped all his stuff. But the person who ran the store said it was dropped 5 minutes before. And they didn't find any Ray's fingerprints. It was all wiped clean. Somehow he was fleeing the crime scene after pulling off the crime of the century in a hurry, but had time to dust off all the fingerprints. And then his prison radio was there when everyone said he couldn't have escaped the prison with the big radio because he had escaped prison. Anyway, when you know the pattern, you can see it just keeps repeating over and over. And obviously, they're setting this guy up. Poor guy is doomed, just like James O'Reilly, because Ray couldn't get a trial. They conned him into pleading guilty with all kinds of bribes. And then when he said he was coerced and asked for a retrial One of the judges was murdered, who was actually contemplating or taking some measures that might have enabled him a retrial. The judge got killed, and then they gave Ray all these CIA lawyers to make sure he wouldn't get a trial where all the facts could come out. So, when you know the history, that's why I hope my book will be widely read, so more and more people will understand the corruption and cover-ups in place, and that these assassinations are part of our political structure. But we've got to try and hold people accountable. They get away with it time and time again.
Let me show you people. This is from Kim Iverson's channel. I would advise people, though it is from Kim Iverson's channel. She has a great channel. I watch all of her stuff. I really enjoy it. No, I agree with everything. I don't even agree with everything I make. I look at some of my old videos and say I was out there, but she does great work. I watch all of her videos. So I would advise you guys to go over to check out Kim Iverson's channel and to subscribe to her channel and help her keep it going if at all possible. This is from Kim Iverson's channel. Watch this. This is an old, like 10-year-old video with Erica Kirk.
That make our grid extremely vulnerable that we've presented to congressional officials. 1 being cyber, 2 being hackers, 3 being physical threats, 4th one is solar EMP, and the 5th one is man-made EMP. So the concern that we have is that we put out this critical information, and when we go over this risk analysis, they hear what we're saying, but they don't want to take action.
Well, there are 18 critical infrastructures in the United States: food, water, transportation, communications, etc. All 17 of the others depend on electricity.
If our grid goes down, you can't cook, you're not going to heat anything, you can't run any of your medical supplies, you can't talk on your phone, you can't take money out of a bank, and we turn into total chaos.
If this happens, the system stops.
If a transformer is taken down, we have to order it from Germany or China. It's going to take a year.
Up till recently, there were no comprehensive protective solutions available.
We know what the solutions are. They're not expensive. They're not difficult to employ. We just need the political will to do it and the follow through on the part of the electric utilities to get it done.
The White House is protected from an EMP. The Congress and the CIA and the NSA, all of the areas that need to function in the government are protected. So why can't we be protected?
Around some of these facilities, you don't have much more than a chain link fence to keep people out. Now that seems absurd to me.
I think it is absurd when we now know that attack on as few as 9 grid substations could bring down all 3 major interconnections for the United States grid.
If the power goes out, you get the generator, and if that goes out, you get another one. There's never been a plan for what happens after that.
The director of the National Security Agency, Admiral Rogers, came out and said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Okay.
There you go. There's Erica Kirk in this spook video saying, yes, sirree, Congress has to come up with more money for the military industrial complex. She's there with a former CIA. And this is what, like 10 years ago. And we're not supposed to be suspicious. How in the hell do you get that job? How do you get asked? How are you in your like early 20s interviewing a former head of the CIA for asking probably for hundreds of millions of dollars? It is clear something is very suspicious about Erica Kirk.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's, I mean, my theory is the one I laid out, that probably they were groomed together. The CIA will identify these young people who have certain career, or maybe it's through a family connection, or they're good looking, so they're charismatic, so they have great potential, and so they're recruited, groomed, and that appears to be the case with Charlie Kirk. But then again, he started diverting from the company line, and he paid the price for that. And yeah, Erica Kirk becomes a very suspicious figure in all this. Maybe they're grooming her. You might see her running for political office in the coming years.
No question about that. I think
quickly, as we see, like with Budanov, The CIA people rise to the top. The rest of us get screwed. And, we discussed Obama on this show. He had a meteoric rise in his career. They write memoirs at age 30. Wes Moore seems to be next in line. J.D. Vance, he wrote a memoir. Somebody writes these books for them because these people have no track record as writers and never write anything before or after, yet somehow write these beautifully written books that would take anybody years to write, and to develop that quality of writing and storytelling ability is a skill that takes years. And then these people somehow, then they ask, when did you have time to write it? And Obama says, oh, at midnight, after between midnight and 2 a.m. when the girls were asleep. Yeah, right. You can't, your brain, can't function at that hour and write beautiful. Rather when you've had a full day, and at that time you had small kids. Anyway, it's the same pattern, and it's a sad one, because the worst people, that's what we're getting in our society, the worst people rising to the top, and the good people have no influence and get screwed over, and that's terrible. I mean, and we've seen a terrible outcome as far as the terrible policies, terrible wars. And as the people running the show have no morality at all, and it's running our society into the ground.
And people don't know what questions to ask. I just did a video from the perspective, and we're just about at the end of the time, but I did a video from the perspective of an investigator, because as I told you, I was an investigator, but I wasn't just an investigator. I was the commander of the investigations division, and I taught investigations and taught investigators. And it's like, as a former professional investigator, I can give you a couple. It's about asking the right questions. And if you put Garland Nixon in charge of that investigation, it would be simple. There's some very, very basic things I do, and nobody's asking this. Okay, what would I do that's not being done? I would say the most basic, the foundation of training an investigator is crime scene. Something happens, there's a killing. It is crime scene preservation, right? Which wasn't done. It was the opposite. They destroyed the crime scene, and the crime scene was taken apart. The cameras were snatched, and everybody stops there. But as an investigator, that's not where you stop. That's where you start, right? So most people say, look at this. They snatched the things out of the cameras. They took everything apart. They did all of this. And I said, okay, that's a start for an investigator. So what I would do is, and everybody in the chat, think how obvious this is once I say it. Okay, Garland, it is your investigation. And this is what you got. I watched the video and I said, okay, bring me all the guys on stage. I want to interview them. And I say, I see you took the ceiling tiles down and the chairs and the curtains and all of that. Yes, Mr. Nixon, I did. Where are they now? I want to see them. Isn't that an obvious question? The next day, where are they now? I'd like to see them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spray them with this solution. And if there's any gunpowder, which would mean there was an explosion on stage, but there shouldn't have been an explosion on stage because the explosion was 200 yards away, right? If, let's say, something blew up in somebody's collar, there would be debris from an explosion, minute, but nevertheless, it would be there. So take me to what you did with those ceiling tiles, the chairs, the curtains, everything. Take me to them. I'm going to spray them and see if there's gunpowder. Number one, where'd you take them? Number two, why'd you take them there? Right? Okay. Were you acting of your own? I'm supposed to believe that this happened, and this guy takes this chair, this guy takes this chair, this guy takes a, like I say, this. If I see a basketball team and they run a play, they got a coach. They didn't organically just all go in the same direction. They got a coach who designed the play, right? I'm next going to say, I see you guys immediately started taking this apart. Who told you to do that? Did you just automatically think to yourselves without even talking? Let's all act like synchronized swimmers. I don't think you did. Who told you to do that? I want to talk to that person and find out why they told you to do that. Number one. Number two, right now, where is that stuff? Where's everything you took off of here? Where is it? Take me to it. And why'd you put it there? Oh, by the way, we've got videotape of you taking the flash memory out of the cameras yesterday, sir. Yes, I did. Where is it? I want to see it right now. Where'd you take it? And why did you take it there? You see what I mean? Nobody's asking. They stop at, they took the cameras out, they took this, they took that out. That's where you start. And you ask the specific people, why did you take, where is it? Why did you take it there now? Take me to it. And what you look for, I add this, that this is what you look for. You always look for this. When I start interviewing people, I start interviewing interrogation, I'm going to say, okay, and I'm going to ask them a real difficult question. You know, there's something that'll really freak them out. I want to know why you did this. Where'd you take it, and where'd you take this stuff, and why? What I'm actually looking for is deception. You're not looking for lies, you're looking for deception. So I'm going to look for the hesitation. I'm going to say, you tell me. So you took those cameras out, the flash drive out of those cameras? Yes. Where is it? Why'd you take it there? What I'm looking for, if the guy did nothing wrong, here's what he's going to do. Where's the flash drive? Where'd you take him, and why? He's going to say, oh, well, I put him in the drawer over there because, I thought it'd be a good idea, right? You're not even going to think. You're going to say, I got nothing to hide, officer. Yes, investigator, Detective Nixon, I got nothing to hide. I took him over there. I put him in there. Here, you want me to go get him for you? That's what an honest man would say. But what would a person who's deceiving say? So tell me, where are those flash drives now? Where'd you take them, and why? He's going to hesitate. He's going to go, his eyes are going to go, who, me? He's going to try, because he needs time to think. He can't answer, and he's going to have to hesitate and try to come up with a story, right? And he doesn't know what the hell to do. So he's going to look all over the place. He's going to say things like, who? Oh, me? Who? What? You mean yesterday? Charlie Kirk? It's that? Oh, you. He's going to say things that are absurd because he's hesitating. I want to look for God. At that point, I know he's deceiving me. And as soon as I know he's deceiving me, I know he's got a reason to deceive me. Now I got to dig deeper into this guy. I got to look into his past. Where's he coming from? What's he been doing the last couple of days? I need to see his phone. I want to see who you've texted that day. Who'd you text? Hey, you got your phone on you, right? Yeah. It should show up the text from yesterday. Bring them up. Let's take a look. You got any problem with that? Do you mind me looking at your text from yesterday at the time of the murder? Or are you going to say, oh, no, I need to see my lawyer. Do you have a warrant? Do you just mind? Let's bring it up at that time and see what you got. I can't do that. I kind of didn't think you could. Maybe perhaps I'll need a warrant. Hey, grab that guy's phone. Hold on to it. We're going to get a warrant for it. You're not getting that phone back. We're going to a judge, and we're going to look at that ourselves. See what I'm saying? Why, if I'm a professional investigator, I know how to do that stuff. You know what I mean? I'm a pro. I worked with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force for a year. I know what the hell I'm doing. I could take that case and turn it inside out in 24 hours. And those people are far better than I am. Why can't they? Why is Kash Patel sitting around going, airplane, Egypt, he's always looking like he's a hostage video. So the bottom line is this. If I talk about it for 5 minutes, people look at it and they say, well, Garland's just an average guy. He's an investigator professional, but he's not some FBI specialist. And he just ripped this case into pieces. How come they're not? Nobody's doing that. Oh, by the way, everybody asked about the medical examiner, and all of that stuff, right? The autopsy. Well, guess what? I thought that stuff. But guess what? I'm in charge. My investigator will be at the autopsy, and by law, nobody can stop him from doing that. So my investigator is going to be at the autopsy. When the bullet's taken out of the neck, we put it in a bag. We start a chain of custody. Get that to the lab immediately. Officer, it's yours. You stay with that bullet and you go to the lab with it. You see what I mean? And somebody signs off for it at the lab, and we maintain the chain of custody. Wait, how come we don't know anything about? Again, it's obvious. Something's rotten to the core. And doesn't that really align with the political assassinations book that you're doing, which we're going to certainly talk about and review?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the pattern of cover-up. And I don't believe most of these police agencies are not actually incompetent. They're highly competent professionals who work for there. They solve murders and cases every day, sometimes very complex cases. But these cases are where the corruption comes in, because it's usually a higher authority. The local law enforcement is often intimidated. Like, you can look at the Danny Casolaro murder. The Martinburg police in West Virginia, they were like quaking. They were so nervous. You even mentioned that case, even decades later, if you're trying to, researchers who contact them to try and get any documentation, because this occurred in 1990, they're still just the name, like they get so nervous because it's this mafia complex that's breathing heat on them, and they know that this is a CIA, FBI. It's above their head, and if they were get to the heart of the matter, then they'll be killed. So, or they're intimidated in different ways. So, yeah, it's the top level corruption. That there's no proper investigation. Often the evidence is destroyed right away. And often they get the people to cremate the body because they don't want an autopsy, or the autopsy is kept hidden for years. And evidence is just, it's just all the professional standards are thrown away that normally are in place. Not to say that there aren't some incompetent people or botched cases. That does happen, but a lot of these police agencies are quite professional. But it's corruption. It's not incompetence. It's corruption and intimidation from the top levels, and they're the ones orchestrating the cover-ups. And that's a historical pattern that I've found looking at many different cases, and we see it. We see in the Jeffrey Epstein murder that's being covered up, the Kirk murder, the Trump assassination stuff is also very, very shady. And clearly some kind of deep state operation. Who exactly is behind it, we don't know, but there's a cover up there. This guy Crooks and the Secret Service. I mean, they're normally not incompetent that they would let a guy with a huge rifle get near a presidential candidate and do nothing. I mean, everybody saw him, and yet somehow the Secret Service let him stay up there for all that time. And he's just this community college student, so.
And he seems like he's really, when you look at him and you look at his history, he's not quite, and that fits the pattern too. There's clearly something wrong with this guy, Ryan Ruth.
Oh,
I mean, the Ryan Ruth guy, clearly
yes,
there's
he's a
something wrong with
CIA,
him.
because that case, I did an article. I mean, I don't know everything about the case, but I did spend time reading his book, and that was clearly a CIA, and that's something the CIA does. Like they created a diary for Sirhan to make like he was irate about Robert Kennedy's wanting to give some weapons to Israel, when every candidate in that election was doing that. But they wrote a diary, and friends who knew Sirhan said Sirhan was apolitical. We had tried to recruit him into the SDS, which was prevalent in that era, and he had no interest in politics. And it was this like strange kind of flowery writing, to create a certain impression of the public that he was this Palestinian militant guy, and that was his motive. So Ruth, they seem to have written a book by him that it seemed to maybe have a dual purpose, because maybe they feel, oh, he'll gain notoriety from this incident, so people are going to read the book, and it's just like anti-Trump screed, but it's mixed in with CIA talking points. Like it mixes in like a defense of why Zelensky's delaying elections, and it's kind of incoherent because he's actually talking about something else, and then he'll like interject CIA talking points. And another praise a CIA-backed leader in Peru who mounted a coup. And also what the CIA does is they use hypnosis on people. The other possibility in some of these cases is that they hypnotize people and get them to think a certain way or to transcribe something that they can use as part of the psychological warfare operation. So if you know the pattern, you can be attuned to the tricks they use, and people could be more cognizant of that. And control over the media, besides corruption of the police force, the absolute control over the media and even historians, because like some of the more historical cases, they use these historians to continue to promote the company line and to smear honest investigators. And those are the people who rise in academia, and you find in the teaching students at the elite schools, Harvard, Yale, and others like that, or even in colleges in general. So that's all part of it too. So it's a very elaborate, corrupt web, and it gets at the heart of the corruption of American politics and the decline in our democracy.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to get ready to run. I think we covered a whole lot of good stuff. Don't forget, go to covertactionmagazine.com. That's covertactionmagazine.com. That's Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov's outstanding website. Go there, become a member of the website. There's so much good stuff there. There was a series. I love the 9/11 series, the political assassination series, the Ukraine series, you name it. It's outstanding. So check out that covertactionmagazine.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you very much for all of my everybody, the Patreon, buy me a coffee people, all of that kind of stuff. Don't forget, I do, for the snail mailers, I do have a PO box, so feel free, you can mail there, anything there, whether it's a donation or whatever the case may be, just a letter, a card, you name it. Thanks a lot, everybody. The most important thing you can always do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.